Hi, so for this presentation, we're going to actually be looking at how to narrow the research question. Many of you have already written maybe a couple of drafts of research questions. You've got my feedback on them. I'm sure you have some frustration because maybe I've not told you enough. That's one of the real frustrating parts of teaching and actually being in a class of writing. I can't write the question for you. It would be very easy if all I did was write it and give it to you, but you have to learn how to develop it. So all I do is sometimes nitpick it and tell you where it needs some work or what are some possible problems, right? So what we're going to do here is I'm going to start with a research question that's in a really bad place, and we're going to kind of walk through how can you make that better by using some of the techniques that we've talked about. So here is my research question draft, right? Should teachers help bad students pass faster, right? Now, as we go through the video, I'm going to ask you questions. And so you should pause the video before I give you the answer so that you can kind of think yourself and then kind of match your answer with mine. And again, some of the questions I'm giving answers because I kind of know where I'm going to head with this question. So I might already be thinking only of those kind of avenues, but that doesn't mean that you have a different answer to these questions, that actually isn't another legitimate way to maybe narrow and focus it, okay? So what's wrong with this question? Right, so first of all, is it an open-ended question? Remember, something that cannot be answered with yes or no. This is one of the criteria for your research question. So pause and answer that question and then turn me back on. Okay, hopefully you saw that no, it isn't an open-ended question. If you begin your question with words like should or would or could or do, right, then the obvious answer is going to be yes or no, right? Now, fortunately, it could be really easy to flip this question around and make it an open-ended question by just adding a how or why or where, right? So again, that might be an easy fix, but unfortunately, this question has some other problems, right? So the next thing to think about is who. Do we see any kind of who, like who is the problem, who needs to be helped, who is involved, right? So think about that. Okay, so yes, we have teachers and students here. These are both words that answer the who. Unfortunately, they're really broad, right? Unless you're writing a paper that whatever you're saying about teachers and students would apply at every single level of education, every single type of student and teacher for every single kind of class, I think you can get where I'm going. It's not going to work, right? And even if you could, that's not going to be something you could write about in a short paper. That's going to be maybe several dictionaries worth of information, right? So we definitely have some narrowing. We do have something. It doesn't just say, should we help students, right? If you said we wouldn't really even know who you're even talking about, right? So at least we do have something that's a little bit specific, but it needs work. So what? What is asking the question of, maybe what's the problem? What needs fixed, right? So think about this. Can you see an answer to the question of what is happening? Okay, if you did, you can see that, well, we can guess that it's something about student passing rates, right? We don't know a lot of specifics about that, but again, it's clear that there's something going on that is causing a problem with certain students in terms of passing, right? But again, needs to be much more refined. And obviously, you may have an interest in an area, and then you go out and you do that preliminary research like I asked you to do once you got your topics, right? Just to see what is out there, right? What are people debating on in this broader issue? And sometimes that can help you come to a more specific question. So our next question is where, right? Is there any kind of location that this is happening? All right, obviously it's school, but we don't know a specific type of school or level. So again, that's just far too broad because it's going to change depending on if you're a college student or a first grader or something like that, right? When? So what kind of location, I'm not location, but what kind of time factor do we see here? Yeah, sorry, I clicked that too quickly. Yeah. Sometimes time means past, present, or future. Sometimes it actually might be a specific time of day. So here, should and help indicate that this is either present or future. If it said should have helped, then we know we're talking about something in the past. So we do know that we're looking at something for today or in the future, right? But that is, again, still too generic. And again, there might be another time frame that once we start filling in some of the more specific aspects here, that it might actually narrow down to something that's even actually very specific, right? So why? Why is asking, how did this happen, right? Why have we come to this point? So what do you think is the why here? Yeah, we don't really know, right? We can speculate, but at this point, we need to find an answer. And like again, even if you had all of these other things much more specific, maybe it's the why that is what you're going to answer with your research question, right? So any of these actually, if you've got everything else in a very focused part, any of these could be actually what you're trying to answer with your paper, right? So again, who should help students improve and graduate faster, right? If that's your question, then your research and then your essay is going to be about proving who research says is the best group or person or whatever to do this, right? So again, sometimes our research becomes about answering one of these questions, but you probably don't want to have to answer too many of these in your research. That might mean that you've not narrowed down your paper enough. All right, so what other problems have we not addressed in these first 6 questions that you still see here? Okay, hopefully you thought about the word bad and faster. These are all subjective. So when I say, and I might have written this on your paper, subjective means that it doesn't have any real, concrete form except for the individual person. So what I may see as a bad student might not be what someone else says, right? So again, what do we mean by bad? Well, it's not clear because bad is just kind of this vague word. And faster, again, also that's going to be different, right? If a student is working, a full-time job and has a family, maybe for them getting an associate's degree in 5 years is quite fast. Whereas someone else who is just going to school full-time, maybe fast is getting it done in a year, right? Sometimes concurrent students come in with maybe as many as 18 hours completed toward their degree and they can finish their associates in a year, right? So again, faster is a relative term. And so we have to be careful about using any of those kind of words that don't really have a real concrete meaning. They're very abstract, and it's how we're using them and the group that we're using them with and all those things, sometimes personal preference that helps define them, right? Also, bad is a very judgmental term. And I think that we want to stay away from anything that's very negative. We can be critical, but we don't necessarily want to say that somebody is bad, right? So those are things that we need to discover.